There are moments when a nation just shifts into high gear. And right now, that nation is India. As the world's most populous country, its future is, well, it's going to shape all of our futures. So, what's actually in the forecast for 2025 and beyond? Let's get into it.
All right, let's just jump right into the headline number. By 2025, India is on track to become the world's fourth largest economy. Now, this isn't just a small step up on a ladder. This is a genuine reshuffling of the global economic deck.
And to really get a sense of just how big a deal this is, think about who India is overtaking: Japan. That means it's going to become the second largest economy in Asia. So by 2025, that list of global heavyweights is going to look like this: the US, China, Germany, and then India.
So, to get our heads around this huge transformation, we're going to break it down. We'll look at India's economic rise, the opportunities and challenges of its growth, its evolving role on the world stage, the new political reality, its society in transition, and finally, we'll try to piece together what the future of India really looks like.
All right, first up, India's economic rise. Let's dive into the absolutely massive goals that are driving this whole story forward.
And what's really striking here is just the sheer ambition. We're talking about some huge goals set by the country's leadership: a $5 trillion economy by 2028 and hitting $1 trillion in exports by 2030. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're a powerful statement of intent to the rest of the world.
But all this incredible growth, it naturally brings up a pretty big question, right? And that leads us to our second section on opportunities and challenges. Is what's happening in India just a repeat of China's playbook from a couple of decades back?
You might remember the term China shock. That was the huge disruption to global manufacturing when China basically became the world's factory floor. So the big question is, are we about to see an India shock on that same scale? Well, the data suggests maybe not, and there are some really interesting reasons why.
One of the biggest differences, and it's a huge one, comes down to the workforce. Even though India has more people, its active labor force is only about 3/4 the size of China's. A big reason for that is lower workforce participation from women. In fact, projections show India's workforce probably won't get bigger than China's until the 2050s. That makes it a lot harder to just step in and become the new world's factory.
So if it's not just about a massive labor force, what's really lighting the fire under this growth? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is public investment. The government is pumping over $130 billion into infrastructure by March 2025. That is double the share of GDP it was just 5 years ago. And it's funding this nationwide boom in new airports, railways, and roads.
And it's not just the government writing the checks. The private sector is expected to pour in around $800 billion over the next decade. And get this, a massive 40% of that is set aside for emerging industries. We're talking green hydrogen, chip making, data centers, and electric vehicles. This isn't just spending money. It's a really smart, strategic bet on what comes next.
All this investment, both public and private, naturally leads us to our third section, India on the world stage. Let's take a look at how the country is really plugging itself into global supply chains and trade.
If you want a really powerful, tangible example of this shift, just think about the iPhone. By the end of 2025, it's projected that 1 out of every 5 iPhones sold anywhere in the world will be assembled in India. Apple's decision to ramp up production there is a massive vote of confidence.
But, and this is a really important but, we have to put this into perspective. Even with huge wins like the Apple deal, India's overall slice of the global merchandise export pie is still projected to be a pretty modest 3% by 2030. It's growing, for sure, but it's still a relatively small player compared to the big export giants. Now, where the story really flips is when you look at services. This has been India's strength for a long time, and it's only getting stronger. By 2030, India's services exports are expected to grab 6% of the entire global market. In this area, it's a true global powerhouse.
Of course, an economy this big doesn't exist in a vacuum, and that takes us right into our fourth section, the political crossroads. Because the recent election in 2024 has created a totally new political landscape that's going to define India's path for the next few years.
What it really boils down to is this new political balancing act. On one side, you have Prime Minister Modi's party, which lost its outright majority. That means he has a weakened mandate and is forced to govern in a coalition. And on the other side, you've got a newly emboldened opposition and a more confident civil society that's pushing back on some of the more controversial policies.
So what this means is that the government is suddenly facing pressure from all sides.
There's even growing criticism from the RSS, a powerful Hindu nationalist group that's actually the ideological parent of Modi's own party. His reputation as a guaranteed vote winner in state elections has taken a hit. And on top of that, foreign relations are getting a bit more complicated, for instance, with its neighbor Bangladesh.
And all of this political drama is happening while the country itself is just transforming at an incredible pace. That brings us to Section 5, a society in transition, where tech, energy, and social trends are literally reshaping India from the ground up.
When you look at India's energy plan, it's kind of like looking at two sides of the same coin. On one hand, you have this massive push towards a green transition, with huge investments in nuclear, solar, and electric vehicles. But on the other hand, you have the enduring reality. For the foreseeable future, India is going to continue to rely heavily on coal to fuel its incredible growth. We're also seeing the rise of the Indian middle class go global. I mean, just look at tourism. By 2025, the number of Indians traveling internationally is expected to hit 29 million, and their spending power is pretty remarkable. The average Indian tourist already spends way more per trip than the global average. It's a crystal clear sign of growing prosperity.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together in our final section, the future India. How do you balance this country's absolutely immense potential against the really formidable challenges it still has to face?
So when it's all said and done, the India story isn't simple. It's not just one thing. It's a really complex story that's all about this fundamental duality. You have this incredible, rapid economic rise happening at the exact same time the country is trying to navigate some major structural, political, and social hurdles.
And that leaves us with the big open question. India is truly at a crossroads. One path leads to it fulfilling its incredible potential. The other path is a tougher struggle to overcome its very real challenges. The story of the next few years will really be about which one of those paths it ultimately takes.